Welcome to the Wellness Summit panel discussion, Resilience in 2020. We are so happy that you chose to spend time with us this morning. Our hope is that this esteemed group of panelists will share their wisdom and give you important things to consider as you build your own strength and skills during these challenging times. My name is Basha Silverman. I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. I'm also the CEO of Jewish Family Services. We have been on the front lines of this pandemic, providing therapeutic and case management support to so many individuals and organizations that are experiencing increased anxiety, depression, loneliness, food insecurity, unemployment, and so much more. It's been remarkable to me how our community has come together, adapted, and responded to these increased needs. I want to thank the panelists here with us for sharing their wisdom and expertise. Welcome. Please feel free to ask questions during this session. Click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I will ask the panelists as many of your questions as possible. If we cannot get to all of the questions, we'll be sure to answer them with you in a follow-up email. Today, we are joined by Erin Booker, Elly Alexander, and Dr. Darren Levin. Erin is the Vice President of Community Health and Engagement for ChristianaCare Health System. She also serves as a JFS board member. Elly Alexander is the co-chair of the Parents of Transgender Kids Support Group. She has been teaching at the Albert Einstein Academy for many years and is an active and committed JFS volunteer. Dr. Darren Levin is the Director of Clinical Services at Valley Forge Educational Services and an adjunct professor at Temple University. He holds a PhD in school psychology from Temple University. Welcome, Darren, Elly, and Erin. Without further ado, let's get started. So we have a few questions prepared for today's panel, and I'm going to do my best to create enough time for all of you to provide all that you're willing to share with our audience. So get started. Darren, can we start with you? How do you define resilience?
Yeah, thanks. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this process. When we talk about resilience, first of all, let me just say that I love talking about this concept of resilience simply because it gives us all an opportunity to really search within ourselves for ways that we can make our lives better, more meaningful, more helpful to other people. And it's something that we can all do to become more resilient. I think we've all heard that word before, but it really is a wonderful, wonderful process. And I focus on that word process because that's what it is. Resiliency is a process that we all go through, whether we're aware of it or not, whether we're conscious about it or not, whether we want to be conscious about it or not. But resiliency is a process of adapting well in the face of adversity. We're all thrown curveballs in life, right? Every day. Anybody who raises children, who works with children, who goes to work in the morning, who has to experience frustrations on 202 traffic. These are all adverse situations. They're frustrating. And there's a range of frustrations, from just minor frustrations and inconveniences to trauma and tragedy, threats. These are all significant sources of stress, and they build up. And resiliency to me and in our community really means adapting well in the face of those adversities, and being able to respond in meaningful and open ways. And that's enriching, and we can learn how to do this. And that's what's really uplifting and really powerful about this concept of resiliency, that we can learn how to become more resilient. It's not just a personality factor, an innate factor that we're born with. We can learn to adapt well to stressors and even prosper and benefit. And the research is pretty clear, not to get too heady about the research, but the research is very clear that people who experience trauma, significant stress, and who are resilient actually improve. It doesn't mean they don't suffer. We all suffer. We all have to experience frustrations, and it's a painful process. But resiliency, in the sense of adapting well to the environment, means not just getting through it, but benefiting from it, finding the silver linings, finding ways to improve the quality of our lives. And that's what resiliency really is. One of my mentors in life kind of showed me a model when we first started discussing resiliency, many, many moons ago. And I'd like to share that model with you because it was very helpful for me. And very empowering for me. And this is just a sheet of paper, okay? And if you can imagine, I'm gonna fold this a little bit like it's a ramp. And if you can imagine a marble on the top of this paper, rolling down, okay? That marble reflects us, our lives, who we are as people in our day-to-day. And if you notice this paper, if I kind of shift it, life throws curveballs at us. It's never a straight line. We want to get through the days painlessly and as thoughtfully and meaningfully as possible. But when life starts throwing curveballs and moving our day-to-day around, what's going to happen is that marble, our day, is going to kind of drift across these lines. And when that marble drifts across these lines, that's when we feel stress. That's when we feel anxiety. That's when we feel frustration and we feel helpless and overwhelmed. And that's not fun. And the cool thing about learning how to be resilient, and I am going to focus on learning how to be resilient, and we all are, is that those lines can move. These are not personality factors. We can move those lines. We can separate them. We can learn how to be resilient. We can change the way we think. We can change and be aware of how we feel. We can respond differently. We have choices to make in life, and we can move those lines so that when life throws us those curveballs, we can be resilient. We can benefit from these processes. And I think that model helped me as a young professional. I think it helps me to this day. I hope it helps you. There's a lot of hope within ourselves that we can learn to become resilient. And it's all about personal growth. Resiliency is personal growth. And I think that I appreciate that question, what is resiliency? Because it's not a factor of who we are. It's a process of growth. And I'll answer that question and end it there.
That's great. Very hopeful. I asked for that theme this morning before we started. So thanks for kicking it off that way, Darren.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to go to the next question. What are some cultural environmental factors that we as parents and educators use to promote resilience?
So I guess I'll start, Elly, and then I'll pass it over to you, because I think I come from it in a little bit of a different mindset as a clinician and as a mom. I want to kind of talk from that kind of landscape. But Darren, I just want to say I love that model. I actually was taught that model also around resilience, and it's one of my absolute favorite ways to think of it. So
We had the same teacher.
yeah. Always possible. It's always possible. But I think, when we talk about resilience, if we talk about resilience in our kids are living in this world of uncertainty right now, where they're, school stopped kind of without any warning at all. Life stopped in some ways. And I think two things are really important. In your environment, creating a space of safety is so important for kids and for you, to have a space where you can talk about how you're feeling and you're not kind of dismissed. So, I think sometimes as parents, when our kids start to show, discomfort or anxiety, we kind of want to shush it away. And instead, I want to encourage you to really allow them the space to talk about it, to normalize that that's a really appropriate way to feel right now. But we don't have to get stuck there. But when we shush it and push it away, we tend to make people stuck. And so I really want to encourage an environment in your home that really is empowering of honest conversation around feelings and solutions. So it's not just, I have this feeling and I'm feeling totally overwhelmed, or I'm feeling scared and anxious, and then I just stay there. It's okay. I feel scared. I feel anxious. I'm sad. Now, what can we do? How can we take that feeling and move through it? And I think that is such an important part of building resilience in our homes. And so that might look different. For me in our home, it's we have kids' choice nights, where they get to pick everything we do. So they have a sense of control. They pick what we have for dinner. They pick what we do for family activity, or if we're watching a movie or a TV show, they get to choose. And I have multiple children, so we have multiple kids' choice nights. So every kid gets their own night to be able to choose. And that sense of having a voice and having control is so incredibly important. So I want to just encourage, find that environment in your family, what that cultural look for your family can look like. But really, you guys, we are living in this uncertainty time, but there's so much gratitude to be had also. So if we really stay firm in that idea of being grateful and talking about what we're grateful for, we have practices of looking at, what the problems are, but what are the amazing gifts we're being given right now? And can that be a conversation in your home now about what's awesome? What are they so grateful for? How much more time are they getting to spend? I can tell you, as a working mom, I am normally gone from my home 50 to 60 hours a week working. I'm now working at home, and my kids have so much more access to interaction with me than they did before. And how grateful am I for that? How grateful are they for that? And so I think if we learn to reframe in gratitude, it's an incredibly important way to change our environment in our home. And I'll stop with those couple things, but I think really creating a sense of safety around emotion and talking through it, staying grateful, and giving your kids a chance to have a sense of power and control is really important today.
Thank you, Erin. Elly, as an educator, would you like to add to that?
Yes, good morning. I'm glad that Erin said something about creating a space of safety. We are lucky enough at Einstein that we are back in person in school, because we have a lot of space at the JCC campus, and we have small classes that we've kept in cohorts. But every year in my class, regardless of the political climate or what's going on in the world, I always make it a priority to create a space of safety in my classroom. And then we speak a lot at Einstein about failing forward and learning from mistakes. So whenever there's an opportunity for a disappointment in my class, I usually tell that student that they're the lucky ones because they're learning the most. Yesterday we had a vote in school because we're learning about elections, and we're choosing a new mascot. And of course there were some students that were very disappointed, and I used it as a teaching moment. And I think as teachers and parents, those opportunities for some what I like to call planned adversity that give them practice in dealing with the curveballs that Darren was talking about is probably one of my favorite parts of being a teacher, seeing them grow and seeing them deal and with disappointment and then praising them for that. We also talk about, when we talk in school about current events, our previous head of school, Rather Winokur, would talk a lot about looking for the heroes and looking for the silver linings. As a parent and as the co-chair of the Parents of Transgender Kids, we parents in that group learn to deal with a very large curveball, one that none of us were expecting. And it really teaches me and those parents not to have a set idea about how something is going to go. You don't think that you shouldn't, expecting your child to be the gender they were born is a pretty typical thing to expect, but we've all learned to really keep an open mind. And the way that the advice that I got that was the best advice for me is when you're thrown a big curveball, you don't have to deal with it all at once. I was told the story about how do you eat an elephant, and it made so much sense to me because the way you eat an elephant is, Darren?
I don't want to spoil the punchline.
Okay, so it's one bite at a time. And when I was told that story, I literally started crying. I was like, oh my God, I'm choking on the elephant. And when I realized that I could just take it one bite at a time, it was so much easier. And then in the end, we are the lucky ones. We feel very lucky as parents in that group. And when the parents come and talk to the other parents and learn to appreciate the new reality, we feel like we've been gifted with this whole new way of looking at our child, and our child generally is happier. So
yeah.
I could speak more about the youth, that we also have youth groups that meet, and now it's all online. The parents are meeting virtually, which also gives us the opportunity for parents who had trouble getting there for one reason or another are able to come. And the youth have the opportunity to meet as well. They have found this new reality difficult as well. They're teenagers, it's different. My students, they're just thrilled to be together in school. They're totally great about wearing the mask. They've been adapting really well. And but the youth, the teens, I think, are feeling isolated and lonely, and they need connection. And we are providing that connection to the trans and gender expansive youth that are the children of the parents in my support group. So I hopefully will be able to tell you how to reach out.
Thank you, Elly. Your description of the story of the elephant and how helpful it was for you is actually a really good transition to the next question. So my next question is, people, we, are finding it really hard to remember our own needs while taking care of children, parents, or even staff that they work beside, how can we take care of ourselves while caring for others? Erin or Darren, would you like to give us some tools, since you told us this was something we could learn to do?
Sure. I'd be happy to. How can we take care of ourselves? So, great question, because we can't take care of others if we're not taking care of ourselves, right? We have to be in a good place. And I think the first thing that we could do is simply be aware of how we're feeling and how we're thinking, what we're thinking. I think that awareness is critical. I think it's important that we do checks on ourselves. How am I feeling today? How am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? And being very open and honest with ourselves, so we can kind of get a check on ourselves and see where our heads are at, so to speak. And so I think that awareness is very critical right now, and being open to whatever answer we might find. If we're finding that we're frustrated, if we're finding that we're angry, if we're finding that we are stressed, that's important to know. That's important to know because knowing that is going to give us some indication of how we might be responding to others. So I think that's the first part to all this, on how we take care of other people. And that's a hard skill to develop, but the cool thing is we can all develop that right now. We can sit right now and get a check on ourselves and ask ourselves, be aware how we're feeling. Just take 3 seconds. Let's all try that right now, actually. Just 3 seconds. And you don't have to judge yourself for how you feel. You shouldn't judge yourself if you're feeling stressed, if you're angry. That's a human experience. That awareness is critical, though. I think that really is important. I'll turn it over to Erin.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. So awareness, incredibly important. And I just want to add one little thing to that, maybe a tip for people that they can use. So we all kind of carry around these nice little devices with us on a regular basis. I actually set alarms throughout my day that come up, and instead of the alarm having no name, it's a statement to myself. So I actually have alarms that go off throughout my day that tell me to take some deep breaths and check in on how I'm doing. Because I think we get so busy taking care of other people that we forget that we are really important. So that self check-in and self-evaluation with no judgment is so important. So just to add to Darren's, a tool to remember to do that is maybe set yourself an alarm. Otherwise, we might forget the importance of ourselves. But I think the next step to that is, okay, so we've checked in and we're feeling stressed or we're feeling frustrated. Now what? So I think that next step is understanding for you what can bring you some peace in that moment. And you have to have more than one answer to that, you guys, because, one answer might be a really great bubble bath, but you might not be able to stop in the middle of your workday and take a really great bubble bath. I wish I could. It would be amazing, but I can't. But I have little, maybe 10-second deep breathing exercises, or a minute of deep breathing, or kind of focused thoughts. And, there's different ways that you can really recenter and change your focus in that moment and give yourself some kind of that big hug that you need in that time. But understanding what that is for you is really important. And it's a skill, which means you don't have to be born with it. You don't have to just have a certain personality that makes it possible. Everyone can learn to do this. This is what we do. We help people learn to do this. That is what resilience is learning these skills. So again, be hopeful, because you might feel completely out of control right now. But you can learn how to have these skills, how to do the self check-in, how to put in those coping skills. And again, I will come back to gratitude, because it is a central focus in my mind to being a resilient and centered person. And sometimes it is in that moment when you check in and maybe you're frustrated or you're not doing well, identify 3 things that you're really, really grateful for, because it's really hard to feel frustrated and upset when you're focused in gratitude. So I would just encourage you to figure out what works for you, what brings you back to a place of peace. And peace doesn't always mean happiness and joyfulness. It just means being at a calm state. And sometimes that's the place you need to get. It doesn't always have to be one extreme emotion or the other.
Thank you, Erin. Before we go to the next couple questions, because they're really focused in what's happening now, I kind of want to just sort of stay higher level for a second and answer a question that came through the Q&A. So thank you, Dara, for asking this question. It's pointed to Darren. She writes, I agree 100% that resilience is about personal growth. However, when you have physical or mental limitations, the process can be difficult. How do you suggest one go about reasonable goals for the personal resilience each person is capable of? I think what Dara's asking is, how do we sort of customize some of these strategies, maybe where to go for some resources to learn strategies that are right for us. All of us are unique. So
Yeah.
all you, Darren.
Sure. Well, before I punt it to Elly and Erin, I'll attempt to answer. So yeah, we have to adapt these strategies for the individual, right? Because it is a personal experience. It's a personal growth. And so it's hard to answer in some respects because I don't know the individual. But I think at the end of the day, what we want and what we hope for people is that they can approach life in a slightly different way from which they're accustomed to, if what they're accustomed to isn't working, if they're feeling frustrated, if they're feeling angry or anxious and distressed. And I like, again, I know it's kind of conceptual, but I really like the approach of looking at life from a curiosity perspective, being curious about life, being curious about a situation. And I think we can teach people how to do that simply first, just by being present with that individual. I want to stress to everybody that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to help people, to fix people, to get them through things. And before we can even think about doing that, we have to be present with that person. We have to be emotionally available. We have to be physically available, but more so emotionally available, I think. And that presence right there, if we're in a loving and kind relationship, is therapeutic. It is supportive. That's 90% of it. Being present to another individual. But having said that, I like teaching and trying to customize how to teach people to be curious about situations instead of angry about situations, instead of confused about situations, to approach life with a curiosity instead of a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that we can do that. We can customize the language that we use. We can alter our vocabulary depending on limitations. But being curious as opposed to being frustrated is a skill to develop. And these are all skill-based strategies. So how can we teach people to be curious? Right? To me, that's the essential question. And that's, it's how we communicate. It's about how we communicate with the person that we're involved with.
All right, so thank you. Another question came in, which is actually a great sort of transition into a real focus on, okay, all that sounds so great, but like, what about what's really going on right now? Like, I need to talk about this. So one of the questions that came in, and I'm going to combine it with one that I prepared for today. So the question came from Joan. Thanks, Joan. Thank you for the thoughts on peace, but what I really want to feel is hope. Is this an unhelpful goal? And if it's an appropriate goal, how do I get there? Before you answer, I really want to tie it to another question that I prepared. And that is, for those of us craving and needing connection, especially as we approach this holiday season, where we are accustomed to being together. And in some cases, sometimes it's that once a year that we really get to do it. What are some strategies for filling that void? What are some strategies for making sure that hope is a priority and a goal that is attainable? I hope I captured that for you, Joan. Who wants to go?
Well, can I build on what Darren said? Because the idea of being curious and not judging as support group co-chairs, we are not social workers, we're just parents ourselves. We were asked to do this group by social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists that needed to send parents somewhere. And what we found by making mistakes is that we needed to do more listening and less advice giving, because every situation is different and we have no way of knowing where that person is coming from, and we can't assume they're coming from a similar situation that we have. So the limitations that that parent might bring to the table, we have no idea, but we can listen, and our goal is to help people be hopeful by feeling that they're not alone. So we've try not to give advice unless the parent specifically asks for it, but to just be curious, ask questions, and mostly just listen. So not to expect everybody to have the same resources, and to not, we should never really be comparing ourselves from one to other people as much as being there to support people and hopefully to provide hope. But that doesn't answer your question about the approaching holiday season, other than to make sure that you do connect in a safe way, either with friends or family, and to as far, that's also my answer to the self-care, which is to make sure that you're making sure to make the connections with the people that you normally would connect with, whether it's walking at a distance outside with a friend and catching up, or making sure you're connecting with family on Messenger or whatever tool you use. But I bet you Erin has more to say about the holiday season.
Thanks, Elly. So I first want to say, Joan, I think it's a great question, and I think being hopeful is absolutely a great goal. I think you want to continue to be hopeful, and it's hard some days. And I think acknowledging that some days are harder to feel hopeful is good, and it's a great first start. But no, I don't think it's a bad goal. Personally, I wake up every day trying to be hopeful and working to be hopeful. And I think that looks differently. And I think it does bring us back to how do we look in a different way at building connection and having, that need, because as humans, we crave human connection. And so don't be frustrated with yourself that you're craving it, that you're missing it. Find new ways to do it. And that is a way to build hope. Elly's idea of taking a walk, like, my goodness, I have walked more in my neighborhood with my friends, safely during this time than I think I ever have. I think I've actually gotten to spend more real time talking to people and hearing from people than I ever have, because I've allowed myself to slow down. And so to me, that's a hopeful thing. I get to have more connection that's real, to have honest conversations about, from one parent to another, how we're dealing, how we're supporting our kids. If our kids are struggling, how do we support each other as parents? But, you know, I think connection looks different. And I think it's really so aligned with being hopeful, because if we are in our home and we feel isolated, it is very difficult to stay hopeful. So I would encourage you, hopeful is a great goal. Staying connected is really important. You know, things I see happening around me that I think are awesome is literally there are, you know, we took traditional block parties that, you know, we used to have every year in our neighborhood, like kind of block parties. And this year it was families in their driveway, but we were all out together, driveway to driveway, getting to talk to each other and connect, allowing kids to be kids and to see them laughing and playing. That provides hope. You know, I think that, you know, focusing on those small wins is a way to provide hope. But during the holidays, I think it, you know, I think one, acknowledging that it's different and it's okay that it's different, and that it's okay if you're a little disappointed that it's different. Being in this whole process, one of the things is being kind to yourself, acknowledging that you have a feeling and acknowledging that it's okay to have that feeling. There's no judgment of that feeling. But I would say, listen, there are really great ways to get together and do things. I have had all of my children had birthdays during the really like true stay-at-home order, where we could not go anywhere, we could not have anyone here. And we made really fun, exciting birthdays for them. And I think that they'd actually say that it was some of the best, because there was so much intentionality around connection and staying together. We had my daughter for her 6th birthday picked that everyone had to dress up. And we all had to come in dresses and suits to have dinner for her birthday to celebrate her. And we had 4 computers or iPads at the table with different family members and good friends that were dressed up in their homes celebrating her. So I think it's just being innovative and finding new ways, but make it fun. And that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Darren, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Erin makes it really easy to talk after her because she says such meaningful and insightful words. Thanks, Erin. I appreciate that. You know, I'm kind of keying in on a specific word she used, and she mentioned the word purposeful, and it really does come down to being intentional, making efforts to be aware. Again, on recognizing how we're feeling. It's really challenging. People spend, you know, a lifetime trying to recognize what they're thinking, the actual content of their thought, because our thoughts drive our emotions, right? And our emotions drive our behaviors. There's a sequence here, but it's really challenging to recognize what we're thinking. And that is something we can start doing right now and work through the holiday season to being intentional on just being aware of our thoughts. They're so fleeting, they're so fast, but they really set our moods immediately without us recognizing it, And so I'll encourage people to spend some time, a few seconds a day, just trying to capture what it is they're thinking. Just try to recognize, without judging it, but recognizing, I just had a thought like things are not getting better. Just recognize it. Recognize the thought, if you have it, that I can't wait until this election is over. Recognize your thought, I can't deal with staying home one more day. Just get in the habit. It's about habit forming. Well, we all 3 of us talked about resiliency as a process, as a growth process. It's not going to happen overnight. Our development doesn't occur that quickly. But it starts with being able and intentionally being able to recognize what our thoughts are and how that might affect our moods. So hope is critical, right? Without hope, we have very little motivation. We have very little intention. Things won't get better without hope. Hope is an essential ingredient, but we can change and we can cultivate hope simply by being aware of our thoughts. That's the first step. And then comes the next step, which is another workshop maybe Basha can set up, on how we can, and again, Erin mentioned this, on how to reframe, right? Recognizing our thoughts and purposely reframing those thoughts.
But we
So
need that now. We need that now. We have 20 minutes left. Everybody listening, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that all the people that are logged on right now, we're with you when you said, I can't wait for this election to be over. I can't stay in this house one more day. I'm feeling worried. Okay. Then what do we do? You told me to recognize the thought. Okay, I got it. Now what? Yeah. So tell us today.
Erin already did, right? So reframing. So I have the thought, I can't wait for this election to be over. Recognize it and then reframe it. I'm going to feel so much better when this election is over.
There you go.
It's going to be a better day once I get through this. Next week, a lot of the stress will be gone. These are 3 just random responses, right? On how we can reframe that negative thought, if you will. I say negative, but I'm not judging it, but it's debilitating. I can't wait for this election to be over. And reframing it. Things are going to be better next week when this election is over, right? That gives us hope. When we have to start cultivating habits, internal habits, so we can build hope, not as a goal, but as a process. Yeah. So it takes effort. It's hard. We have so many things to do in our day-to-day. We have to go to work. We have children to raise. We have education to maintain. But we owe it to ourselves to take care of ourselves and learn about ourselves and how we think and how it affects our outlook. So it's a process. Be kind to yourself in the process. If you need 60 seconds to sit down and let thoughts come into your mind with the intention of just recognizing them, you will start to learn about yourself. You will learn your internal habits. But you have to be patient with yourself. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, can I jump on that a little bit, Darren? I think that's such an important point that, we're up here and we're saying these things and, we've been, I've been trained to learn these things. I've been trained, and that doesn't mean it's easy for me to do for myself. And so I also want to say that, we're saying these things with full understanding that they are hard to implement, and that it takes time and it takes kind of tripping. I loved Elly brought up failing forward. That is one of my favorite kind of mindsets is you can't succeed without failing your way there. And so being okay with having a really bad day and not judging yourself for that, being okay as a parent and giving yourself some grace when maybe you raise your voice when you wish you hadn't. We're going to do those things because we're human and we make mistakes. And honestly, it's for me, I'll say it's a moment where I say to my kids, like, listen, mommy made the wrong choice and I got upset and I raised my voice and I wish I hadn't done that, but I'm human and I have reactions sometimes. And it gives them permission to have a reaction sometime and be able to then say, you know what, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle it and I'm sorry, but I'm human and I make mistakes and I act on emotion. So I think also recognizing that this is a real process that takes time and it takes effort. And it takes failing. And so don't go into it thinking, I need to be able to recognize my thought, reframe it, and move on. Sometimes the reframe feels not great. The reframe feels like, well, why am I even upset about this? This shouldn't be upset. Like I have done that to myself personally, where something is really bugging me. Like someone said something about like maybe an opinion and I'm like, and I get really stuck on it. And then I have to say, reframing that their opinion does not define how I live my life, but it still frustrates me. And that's okay. So I think, always as we're doing these things and learning, give yourself grace. The grace you would give others around you, make sure you're giving to yourself in this process.
And look at it like the real estate market. It's going to go up, it's going to increase, it's going to do better, but then it's going to take a dip. You're going to take a dip too. That's cool. All right, that's fine. The big picture, the forest and the trees, it is a growing experience. Right? That's our challenge.
we've been talking in my class about having to see dark times in order to appreciate the good. And maybe this Thanksgiving will make us really appreciate past Thanksgivings where you know, Uncle Stu was really bothering us, but now we're going to appreciate that we got to be together. We're reading that. If you just need a good diversion, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo is what I'm reading with my class. And it's about learning to appreciate what we have, because if we have everything we need all the time and everything's perfect, we don't appreciate love, and we don't appreciate the material things we have even. So I was going to say that, well, one of the ways that I've, you know, one of the silver linings that I've had, like Erin, was on those walks, appreciating just my neighborhood and meeting all my neighbors. And one of the ways that I did that was when the shutdown happened, we were in a position where we could see how we could help. And I was teaching online, so I felt like I was already doing my part. But since we were home, we actually fostered a dog, and we probably never would have done that. But talk about bringing joy into the house. As much as it's been difficult, it's gotten us out and walking and meeting all the neighbors. And there's other ways to volunteer. And I think that doing things for other people helps bring you out of those dark times too.
Elly, will you please repeat the name of the book?
The
We
Miraculous.
got a question.
Yeah, and it's good for all ages. It's just a joy to read. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. She's written many books for kids, but
Great, thank you. So this reframing has received quite a few comments, and you could tell it got me all excited because you know, I am definitely aware that I have those thoughts, and I especially about now. There's so much public health threat, election drama, sort of related political unrest that is outside of and in addition to who will be our president, racial unrest and injustice, and the quest for equity. You know, can we spend just a little bit more time talking about how to really reframe some of these things, especially when it's just not that easy to say, it's okay, my candidate will win. Like, what if they don't? You know, like what if you reframe and then your mind just takes you into, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
I pulled together a couple of questions from the Q&A to pull that to, you know, that was a combination of a few people's.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Elly or Erin wants to tackle that, but I can certainly start out. Yeah, what we want to avoid is, you know, kidding ourselves and sugarcoating things and not being honest and realistic. What we do want to do is living and I think reframing things from a cold perspective. So what I mean by that, and some of you folks might be familiar with Dr. Daniel Siegel, and he endorses a cold perspective of approaching life and approaching thought, reframing from the perspective of COAL. And that stands for curiosity, openness, acceptance, and loving kindness. So we have to get into habits. What I encourage us to do is getting into habits of reframing our thoughts with one of those concepts in mind. So let's take it just because Basha seems to have some stress over the election, we'll focus on the election for a second. And we might have the thought again, this is terrible. I can't believe we're in this situation. That's a realistic thought that causes us stress. What would be a way that we can reframe that from a perspective of curiosity?
Okay.
From the perspective of openness. And I'm going to make it up. Maybe an open perspective might be something like, if my candidate doesn't win, I'm going to have to find new ways on how to find meaning in my day-to-day. That's an open perspective, because we don't have that much control. We can vote, of course, and I encourage everybody to vote. But at the end of the day, how are we going to deal with that particular situation? Mm-hmm. We can put our heads in the sand. We can choose to do that. We can choose to be frustrated and throw our hands up in the air, or we can choose to be open about how will my day change? How will my life be? How will my life be for my kids? What do I want to teach my kids? What am I going to have to do differently so that I can make sure that my children get appropriate role models, for example? That's approaching the same situation with an open perspective. And that's a challenge, but life is a challenge, right? Let me share another example, if I may. My father was 86 years old when he wanted to tour Masada. And my father was a victim of stroke. He had terrible arthritis. And he was walking around in the summer heat at the top of Masada. And one might attribute that to, bullheaded determination. But he put his pain away and he approached this with curiosity. I want to see this. This is important to me. And he chose to disregard the pain he experienced. It doesn't mean it wasn't there. It doesn't mean he didn't feel it. He did. But the curiosity element far outweighed the other perspective. And so he made a conscious decision, a choice to be curious, to let that rue the day, so to speak. And I think we have to do the same thing. We have to approach our thoughts with curiosity, with openness, with acceptance, with kindness, so that we're not victims of our knee-jerk emotional reaction, but rather thoughtful, contributory human beings. And I'm just looking at the time, so I'll zip it and turn it over to Elly and Erin.
I'll jump in really quickly, and then Elly, let you close us out with it. But I think I love what you said about, that curiosity and openness, because, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit of a different part of what Basha brought up. So, let's talk about the racial, tension and unjust that's happening, and strive for equity in our world. And, I'll just share that I am married to a Black man and have biracial children. And this time has been very challenging. My oldest is 12, and he is starting to really understand what he's seeing and what he's hearing, and understanding that he has been the receiver of some of those microaggressions or some of those racial comments. And helping him and myself as a white woman learn how to be supportive, to help him approach it in a loving way, but also an open and really curious way of what role can I play in impacting change? And maybe instead of taking that feeling of there is true victimization happening, but don't get stuck there. Don't stay there. What can I do? What action can I take? So if we think about, what's going on, what can we do as the person, ourselves, to really create change and be a part of the change in the way that makes sense for us? It gives us a sense of empowerment. And I think empowerment is really important. I taught my son that at 12 years old, his voice matters. how he treats people, how he receives the treatment he gets. Those things matter. And so he has an ability to change in his way other people by how he engages, how he acts, how he receives feedback, how he gives feedback. And we all have that power. And so I think, part of reframing is, well, okay, so if my candidate doesn't win next week, what can I do? What action can I take to help to move us in the direction that I, as a mom, want to pass on to my children? So don't, find an action that you can take. I think that's really, really powerful. Elly, I will pass it to you.
That's basically what I was going to say. So I appreciate that. How can we contribute?
That's actually my last question. And since we have 4 minutes, and you all have shared so generously, like personal strategies. But my last question was really, how do you find strength to endure right now? And especially in preparation for the very likelihood that this is long lasting, and long lasting is, arbitrary. Is that 6 months? Is that a year? Is that forever changed? But what are just, maybe, if you wouldn't mind sharing one more, or one that you wished you had time to share, strategy that you're using and is working for you, or it's working for your family or someone you love?
I'll go first. And it's a really quick one. Point out the good. Take a minute to recognize the good and call it out and say it. When something fun happens, when something awesome happens, when your kids giggle, and it's just a fun moment, call out the good. We do a lot of calling out the stress and the negativity. Make an effort to call out the good.
Elly?
Well, maybe not to get a set idea about how things will be is repeating something I said earlier. I think Erin and I would be fast friends because she keeps saying what I'm thinking. And yeah, that's what's working for me, is looking for the good and finding ways to contribute.
I'll just repeat what I said earlier, if I may, and encourage us all to be curious about our situations, be open to what they bring, accept our situation with a perspective of that curiosity and openness and kindness. These are skills that we can develop. It starts with awareness. And it goes from there. But be kind to yourselves, forgive yourselves. These are life changes. These are evolutions of the self. It takes time, and be kind to yourself as you go through it.
Great. Okay, well, we have 1 minute left. I'm just going to take that minute myself. Thank you. Thank you so much, Darren, Elly, and Erin, for sharing your wisdom and experience with me, with everyone listening. Thank you to all the attendees for participating. And please remember that if you or someone you know needs any help at all, please call Jewish Family Services, 302-478-9411, or find us online, jfsdelaware.org. And if we can't help you, we have friends. We will connect you. Obviously, we know some talent in our town. So, and if you also have time, please check out the other sessions. We have several scheduled for today. We hope that you can come, and closing tonight. So thank you again. Wishing you all a peaceful weekend, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Basha. Thank you, everyone.
Basha.
Bye.
Bye.